Hello everyone, welcome to my class. Today we are going to talk about literary devices in the poem. But before we start, let's pray together based on our beliefs. Okay, now do you want to know what poem we will discuss? Yes? Great. We will learn literary devices of the poem I Wandered, Lonely as a Cloud by William Wordsworth. Then, who is William Wordsworth? You might just wonder. William Wordsworth is one of the leading poets of English Romanticism, and along with Samuel Taylor Coleridge and Robert Southey, is regarded as one of the Lake poets. Poets are named because of their association with the Lake District in Cumbria in northern England. William Wordsworth was also one of the founders of English Romanticism, and one of its most central figures and important intellects. He is remembered as a poet of spiritual and epistemological speculation, a poet concerned with the human relationship to nature, and a fierce advocate of using the vocabulary and speech patterns of common people in poetry. What about structure and form of this poem? The poem is composed of 4 stanzas of 6 lines each. It is an adherent to quatrain couplet rhyme scheme, A B A B C C. Every line conforms to iambic tetrameter. Iambic tetrameter is a poetic meter which has 4 iambs per line. An iamb is an unstressed syllable followed by a stressed syllable. The poem Daffodils works within the ABABCC rhyme scheme as it uses consistent rhyming to invoke nature at each stanza's end. This poem is written from the first person point of view, therefore it is an ideal example of a lyric poem. The poetic persona is none other than Wordsworth himself. This piece contains a regular meter. There are 8 syllables per line, and the stress falls on the second syllable of each foot. There are 4 iambs in each line, thus the poem is in iambic tetrameter. What is the meaning of this poem? But before I tell you the meaning of this poem, we will listen to someone who is reading this poem. He is Christian Bird. Let's listen to it, guys.
I wandered lonely as a cloud that floats on high over vales and hills, when all at once I saw a crowd, a host of golden daffodils, beside the lake, beneath the trees, fluttering and dancing in the breeze, continuous as the stars that shine and twinkle on the Milky Way. They stretched in never-ending line along the margin of a bay. 10,000 saw I at a glance, tossing their heads in sprightly dance. The waves beside them danced, but they outdid the sparkling waves in glee. A poet could not but be gay in such a jocund company. I gazed and gazed, but little thought what wealth the show to me had brought. For oft, when on my couch I lie in vacant or in pensive mood, they flash upon that inward eye which is the bliss of solitude. And then my heart with pleasure fills, and dances with the daffodils.
The poem is pretty magnificent, right? Now, let's get back to the meaning of the poem. Just like I said before, he is remembered as a poet that was concerned with the human relationship to nature. This poem talks about nature as well. Wordsworth's I Wandered Lonely as a Cloud is a descriptive poem in which the author expresses the happiness he gets. After enjoying the beauty of a great number of daffodils, he begins the poem by telling his loneliness. The solitude of his, however, is gradually lessened as he keeps on gazing at the nice features and movement of the daffodils. After describing how the blowing wind makes the flowers move, dance, and stretch continuously in an endless line along the bay, the poet states that whenever he feels sad, he will try to recollect the beauty of the daffodils in his mind. By doing this, he will directly find the bliss of solitude, which enables him to get happiness. The subject matter of this poem is the beauty of the daffodils seen by the poet because nearly all of the lines are dominated by the descriptions which emphasize those flowers' beauty. It is true that the poet sometimes talks about other things, like stars on the Milky Way and waves of the lake beside the flowers, but these things are merely meant to be a comparison to emphasize the impression of the beauty of the daffodils. Despite the fact that the beauty of the daffodils dominates the poem, the poet does not present it for its own sake. He actually relates that beauty to his life. In the first line, by using a simile in which he compares himself to a floating cloud, precisely describes how deep his loneliness is. Then, in the final lines, he resolutes that the beauty of the daffodils facilitates him a very precious quiet time to retrospect his life. After the retrospection, he finally managed to expel his sadness. We can easily understand this phenomenon by realizing that solitude can be used as a good condition to make one's life retrospection to understand his true self. Now, without waiting any longer, let's move on to our main discussion. What are we going to discuss? We are going to discuss literary devices in this poem, such as personification, imagery, simile, hyperbole, metaphor, alliteration, assonance, and symbol. Does anybody know what personification is? No? Okay, let's define personification. Personification is a literary device that gives human characteristics to non-human things or inanimate objects. The non-human things can be animals, objects, or even a concept. The human characteristics given to these things can be emotions, behaviors, or actions that bring non-human things to life. Personification is common throughout literature and everyday speech. It can add life, energy, and animation to otherwise lifeless objects or subjects. Let me give you an example of personification. The sun smiled down on us. Can the sun smile on us? No, exactly. That is personification. It gives human characteristic to non-human things or inanimate objects. As you know, humans can smile, but the sun cannot. And perhaps the most memorable instance of personification in the poem is the image of the daffodils. The daffodils are joyous in their movements, engaged in a sparkly dance, a very human-like image that feels fitting to the scene. This is a repeated image the reader is reminded of the first stanza, in which they are dancing in the breeze. The harmony of nature is underscored in a bright, uplifting image in which the flowers move with a purposeful rhythm that expresses peace and happiness. The symmetry and interconnectedness of nature is made clear as the daffodils mirror the waves that beside them dance too. The golden daffodils transcend the overall beauty of the scene. They outdid the sparkling waves in glee. There is no sense of competition in the natural world. Instead, it is replaced with communication to ensure lasting peace in this realm. The breeze encouraged the daffodils, helping them to dance. All aspects of nature cooperate, working as a whole. The daffodils are further personified by Wordsworth, as he describes them as jocund company. He feels uplifted and inspired by his companion, underscoring the innate connection between the individual and nature. Let's move on to another poetic device used in the poem. Let's start off with the imagery. First, let's define imagery. Imagery is a literary device used in poetry, novels, and other writing that uses vivid description that appeals to readers' sense to create an image or idea in their head. Through language, imagery does not only paint a picture but aims to portray the sensational and emotional experience within text. Imagery can improve a reader's experience of the text by immersing them more deeply by appealing to their sense. Imagery in writing can aim at a reader's sense of taste, smell, touch, hearing, or sight through vivid description. In the first stanza, the quote starts with, "When all at once I saw crowd, a host of golden daffodils beside the lake, beneath the trees, fluttering and dancing in the breeze." So the author paints a picture in the minds of the readers of the setting of where the story is taking place, where the daffodils are, like how it says, "The daffodils are right beside the lake and directly under the tree." Another part of imagery used in the second stanza of the poem is, 10,000 saw I at a glance, tossing their heads in sprightly dance. This paints another picture in the reader's head of the number of daffodils there were in the field. It wants us to imagine a large number of them, like how it mentioned in the poem, and it also wants us to imagine how they are moving. Another example of imagery in the poem is also in the second stanza. This quote says, "Continuous as the stars that shine and twinkle on the Milky Way, they stretch in never-ending line." The author wants us to imagine the number of daffodils as a never-ending line. That means he's seen so many that they are continuous. The last sign of imagery in this poem comes from the third stanza. It says, "In such a jocund company, I gazed and gazed, but little thought what wealth the show to me had brought." The author wants us to imagine the happiness that is going through his head when looking at the daffodils. He wants us to feel joy just like he had in the poem. Overall, this gives the poem a strong effect because the author wants us to imagine the things that he is saying and how he does it. He does it really well because he describes it in great detail. This gives the poem an overall effectiveness to see what he is seeing and to feel what he is feeling. And that is explained really well in the poem. The author uses strong words to create an image to help us as the readers to see the way he wants us to see. A simile is a figure of speech that makes a comparison showing similarities between two different things using the words like or as. The word comes from the Latin similis, meaning similar, like. They are often used in literature such as poetry or novels, but it is also a device used in film by screenwriters. There are only 2 examples of similes in this poem. The first one is found in the opening sentence, "I wandered, lonely as a cloud." He pretty much compares his loneliness and uses an example of a single cloud to visualize the people how his loneliness felt. The second example of simile was used on the second stanza in the opening line. It is continuous as the stars that shine and twinkle on the Milky Way. Here the author compares the endless amount of daffodils with an endless amount of stars, because in the poem it states that there are 10,000 daffodils in the field. This gives an overall effectiveness to the poem because the purpose of a simile is to get the imagination of the reader going while also getting the information across. This is super helpful when it helps the reader see the scene in their heads. This is used very well in the poem from the examples that it used. Well, there is a hyperbole in this poem, and there is only one example of this being used in the poem. This is used in the second stanza where it says, "They stretch in a never-ending line along the margin of a bay. 10,000 saw I at a glance." This is definitely hyperbole because we don't believe it is possible to find a field with 10,000 daffodils. Wordsworth might have wanted to paint an image to the readers on how the setting would look like This gives an effectiveness to the poem because a hyperbole is to emphasize a message that is being passed to the audience. It sort of gives a sense of humor in some sense because of the exaggerated amount of daffodils that says in his poem. Metaphor is the literary technique in which a figure of speech is applied to a subject in a non-literal sense. A metaphor is a figure of speech in which a word or phrase denoting one kind of object or idea is used in place of another to suggest a likeness or an analogy between them. Now, let me give you an example as well. His words cut deeper than a knife. Words don't materialize into sharp objects. In this metaphor, someone has said something hurtful to another. So, we can consider the last stanza as an example. The poem's closing stanza acts as an extended metaphor where the image of the inward eye represents the sweet memory of daffodils. But what is an extended metaphor? An extended metaphor is a comparison between two unlike things that continues through a series of sentences, lines in a poem, or even an entire novel. An extended metaphor can serve as an excellent way to show a film's theme. Well, Wordsworth's vivid imagery highlights how the lasting beauty of the daffodils remains with him even years after. Still, it retains the same power of brilliancy that can lift him from whatever vacant or pensive mood he might be in. Even when he is beyond the reach of nature, he is no longer lonely, as he might have been at the beginning of the poem. Instead, the scene accompanies him throughout his life, accessible through his memory. Finding the bliss of solitude with the image of the daffodils in his mind's eye, he can enjoy isolation, allowing him to find pleasure and peace in his deep connection to the natural world, free to dance alongside them to his heart. As I said, a simile is a figure of speech that makes a comparison, showing similarities between two different things, and a metaphor is a figure of speech in which a word or phrase denoting one kind of object or idea is used in place of another to suggest a likeness or an analogy between them. Then, what is the difference between a simile and a metaphor? They both liken two wholly unlike items. The difference is where a simile uses the like or as to compare. A metaphor frankly states something as being. Let's move to another literary device. Alliteration is the repetition of a letter or sound in a series of words in succession to create an audible lyrical effect. The repetition of consonants is known as consonance and of vowel assonance. And there are examples found in this poem. These examples are the usage of G sound in I gazed, engaged, and the usage of the W sound in what with the show to me had brought. Alliteration is used to repeat speech sounds in a set of words. This is used effectively and properly in this poem. It creates a type of rhythm and mood. This captures the attention of the readers because it wants us to be focused on that. In I Wandered Lonely as a Cloud, there are also various moments of alliteration that work to different effects. I wandered, lonely as a cloud that floats on high o'er vales and hills. In the poem's opening lines and throughout the first stanza, there is a repetition of the L sound. This immediately creates a lulling effect, inducing the reader into a dream-like state where they are invited by Wordsworth to float above the scene. This repetition also creates a feeling of weightlessness that is not bound to the earth. Instead, the speaker is allowed the freedom to roam where the wind might take him. There seems to be absence of restriction in the natural world where one is free to drift as they please, perhaps in contrast to the limitation of the urban city. There is also alliteration in the H sounds in high and hills, creating a sense of lightness and weightlessness that a cloud might have. This underscores the great altitude at which the speaker is operating and the majesty of natural features. Assonance occurs when two or more words that are close to one another use the same vowel sound. Writers of poetry and prose can use this technique. It is used to add rhythm and musicality to a poem or story. The lines read more fluidly with a line of unity that of a similar sound running through them. This is one of several literary techniques that's employed for the enhancement of sound. In the simplest term, when read lines that contain assonance are more pleasing to the ear than those that don't. There are two examples in the poem. The examples are the sound of T in what with the show to me had brought, and the N sound in vacant or in pensive. This is used very effectively in the poem because it gives the poem a more structural feel but also having a rhyming effect as well. This is used properly in the poem and it gives a great tone to the poem. Symbolism is a literary device where symbols work to represent ideas. In symbolism, the symbols align with the overall tone and theme of the poem. If it's a tough subject, the words take on a negative or morose tone, while the symbols evoke image of cold or dark objects. These indicators also align with the theme or overall message of the poem. The example of the symbol is roses in Robert Burns' poem, Red Rose. Well, when it comes to symbolism, examples in poetry, roses are commonly a symbol of love and romance. You can see this through the lines of Robert Burns' love poem. The red rose symbolizes love, while the melody symbolizes the beauty and grace of his lover. Now, what about in the poem I Wandered, Lonely as a Cloud? I Wandered, Lonely as a Cloud, William Wordsworth applies different elements of poetry to highlight his themes. For instance, he uses symbolism to connect human beings with their immediate environment or nature. A symbol is an object, either living or non-living, that represents something else in reality. Therefore, the reader has to think carefully to unravel the hidden meaning. Wordsworth's use of symbolism in his poem reveals his observatory skills and his ability to appreciate the nature around him. The title and the first stanza of the poem highlight the first symbol in the poem. The personal likens himself with a cloud, yet naturally, the cloud is a non-living object located many miles away from the earth. The cloud is a symbol which represents loneliness. Moreover, the cloud is naturally incompatible with the earth, surface, or human beings. But the poet's close identification with the cloud reveals his loneliness, isolation, and desolation from the world around him. In the fourth line of the first stanza, the persona identifies the daffodils at the lake, which symbolize love or happiness. He calls the daffodils a crowd, which is a word only used to identify human beings. The dancing prowess of the daffodils, especially the movement of their heads, symbolize the happiness the persona is yearning to experience one day. Although he is lonely and sad, the observation of the flowers puts a smile on his face. Thus, the daffodils are a symbol or source of happiness, which is the heart's desire of the persona. In addition, the speaker observes that the daffodils dance better than the waves, which confirms that when he is happy, he is automatically connected to the world. The high number of daffodils, the speaker observes, grows naturally, and they symbolize the rich environment or soils he lives in. Therefore, probably the source of his unhappiness is not economical, but maybe social-oriented. Additionally, when the speaker is unhappy, he only remembers the daffodils to alter his somber mood. The daffodils offer him company, they cheer him up. Well, symbolism is an element of writing, especially in poetry. Symbols have hidden meanings which need the reader to unravel intelligently. Wordsworth uses natural objects to express the theme of nature. He used the natural objects like flowers to both inspire him and promote unity in the society. Guys, the class will end soon. So before the class ends, I'm going to give multiple choices question. You have to answer the question before the time is up. Let's start. The class is over, but before I end this class, we will pray together as well. Okay, thank you so much for your attention. I also apologize for all the mistakes during the discussion, and feel free to watch the video again.